going to call the meeting of the public hearing for the 2021-22 school budget for North Syracuse Central School District to order. Could you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you very much. I'm now going to turn this over to Mr. Keegan and Mr. Bowles and Dr. Leahy, who will go through the proposed school budget, as well as the vehicle bonding proposition and a library proposition. Thank you.
Good evening, folks. Thank you for being here. Tonight, we're going to take you through the proposed 21-22 budget. We'll talk about our revenues. A number of Dr. Leahy and Superintendent Bowles will tell us about some of the considerations impacting the 21-22 budget, some initiatives that we're embarking on and excited about. And we'll talk a little bit about the financial condition of the district, our vehicle proposition, as well as our library proposition. So I think to say that the state aid status here in North Syracuse was good news is an understatement. We had probably the most significant increase in state aid that we've had in recent history, particularly foundation aid, the single largest component of our state aid. And further, the state legislature committed to increase funding over the next 3 years to fully fund our foundation aid, which has been a big issue. We're going to talk about that in a moment. We also, each year, the state, the governor in particular, has looked at different ways of funding schools, and he introduced a concept called services aid, which was going to recharacterize some of our critical expense aids. And we're very appreciative of the fact the legislature passed on that and did not do that. That was something that we were a little bit stressed out about. And then we received a significant increase in UPK funding. This is the first increase in a long time in UPK funding. And Dr. Leahy and I are working to understand the available funding and the working with our partners locally to work toward giving the opportunity for students in this community to have a full day program for the 4-year-olds. A lot of numbers on this chart. This is what we call our state aid run, and the first column is the description, starting with foundation aid, and the next column is the current year's budget, the 2021 budget, and the next column is the approved budget. And you'll notice that first line is the biggest component of state aid, foundation aid, and we got a $3.5 million increase this year, which was great. I'm just going to say long overdue, and I'll talk a little bit about foundation aid. And you'll see we're still receiving less foundation aid than the district is supposed to, but this is a step in the right direction. The next category, called excess cost aid, is the aid that we receive for servicing our special ed population, whether they be in a private setting or a public setting. And the way New York State works is they don't give us any additional aid until we get above our threshold. And so our threshold for North Syracuse is about $33,000. So the first $33,000 is funded out of our regular aid. But when we have some of our higher cost students that require a lot of services, we get some additional aid. And we were very appreciative of the increase in that aid. And although we have had a slightly declining enrollment in our general population, our special ed population has consistently increased in recent history. The next three areas, hardware and technology, software, library, and textbook, are those two categories, are simply based on our enrollment. And since our enrollment's been declining slightly, you see that there's a slight decline in each of those areas. Transportation aid, that's the aid that we use to pay for all of our drivers and attendants and our fleet and the related maintenance. And that's just up slightly over the prior year. And then BOCES aid, we continue to work very closely with our BOCES. That's our Board of Cooperative Education Services, to work with other districts here in central New York to provide services to our special ed population. BOCES provides information technology services and a number of key curricular programs that we participate in. So we've used them a lot, and therefore the amount of aid that's we receive associated with BOCES has gone up. So our total aid without building aid has gone up about $5.3 million. Our building aid is down. That's simply the timing of projects. We are in the midst of working on our Bear Road Elementary School. That's the biggest project we've got going on, and that project will generate more aid. It just doesn't kick in this year. The pandemic adjustment was something that we had to deal with during the current year. And what that basically was the state of New York didn't have enough money to fully fund education this year, but the federal government stepped in and provided the shortfall. So that's why those two numbers net each other out. And then finally, looking at the UPK funding, you'll see that our funding went from $606,120 to over $1.7 million. And again, our hope is to be able to provide full day programming for more students in our community. The 606-120 provided a half day program for about 235 students. As the audience probably is well aware, we have about 600 kids in our average kindergarten class. So the increase in UPK funding is long overdue. I'm going to just touch on foundation aid, and this stems back to laws of 2007, where they reformed state aid, and what they basically did was it was a great change in the way schools were funded, in that a lawsuit was brought against New York State by schools that felt that they weren't receiving adequate funding. The state lost the lawsuit, and the funding was changed so that it funded based on the needs of the district. Higher wealth districts got lower aid per pupil, and lower wealth districts got higher aid per pupil. It looked at regional averages in terms of what it costs to provide an education. And the bottom line is the state committed to provide enough state aid that the district could provide a sound basic public education for its students. This chart tracks just through this year. It doesn't have the 21-22 year on it, but it tracks our experience with foundation aid. And as you can see, each year there's been a significant shortfall. And there's just no other way to say it. When you're short funded $13 million, we've had to really be innovative in the way we've provided programming to students, and the way we've maintained our facilities, and a lot of things that we've done. Since 2007-8, we've had a shortfall of about $177 million in this most important aid category. We're very happy that the legislature this year has made a commitment to fully fund foundation aid within 3 years. We did also, and this was in the paper, people saw that under the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan passed by Congress and signed into law by President Biden in March, North Syracuse is eligible to receive a little over $11 million. The parameters of that program are still being worked out, but it's a program we apply for, reimbursement of eligible expenses. We're receiving information daily about what constitutes eligible expenses. The funds were not factored into our New York State aid information. And we mentioned that, and that might seem a little odd, but previously, when New York State has had a shortfall, they've relied on federal funds to close that gap. This year, they did not do that, or for the 21-22 school year, they did not do that. So that was really good news for us. So we did not use the over $11 million in federal funds to balance the 21-22 budget. The reason for that is that it's one-time money, and we want to be really careful how we incorporate it into future district budgets. And we want to ensure that whatever we do in terms of programming, that we can sustain that programming to have positive outcomes for students. This will give us a year to see what the budget deliberations look like next year, and we'll be able to start to incorporate that money into our budget over the next 3 or 4 years. Our revenues this year are $180.2 million. And as I say every year, the vast majority of our revenues come from the tax levy. That $95.3 million represents almost 53% of our revenues, and state aid, about 41.8%. This just gives you a little bit of a breakdown. I've kind of covered the state aid portions of this. Couple things, we are relying on fund balance, kind of dropping back to my comment about federal stimulus money. The district has done a good job, and I'll talk a little later about our fund balance, but we've done a good job of managing our balance sheet. And as a result, we've appropriated extra fund balance, or fund balance that we have in savings, toward supporting programming. And we felt that we wanted to continue that until we better understood the federal stimulus funding. You'll see a couple other items in here: sales taxes, interest. We really thought we would do better in the 2021 school year. Interest rates were, at the time we were doing our budgeting, on the rise. We had introduced some new investment vehicles that were authorized by the Comptroller's office. But truth be told, interest rates have just not been strong. We have a little more realistic budget for the 21-22 school year for interest. Again, our total budget's $180.2 million, about a $7.6 million increase, or about 4.46%. Moving on to the tax levy. The tax levy is the amount of money that we collect from our local taxpayers based on their school tax bills. And consistently, the North Syracuse Central School District has simply applied the tax cap formula in calculating this levy. And while this is a controversial formula in that many folks say that it's not adequate and it doesn't provide enough funding, there are elements of it that make some sense. It starts with the prior year's levy, the 2021 levy. It looks at the gross growth of our tax base, and it realizes that if more houses are being built and more roads need to be covered, and the tax base is growing, that the district should be able to grow its levy to support that tax base. It also looks at pilot revenue. Those are payment in lieu of tax agreements. And this is a constant in a large community like North Syracuse Central School District. We have folks negotiating, hey, if we come in and we create these jobs or we expand our operation, will the local municipalities give us a discount? And to be very clear, what often happens with a pilot agreement is we might have a piece of property that's assessed at $10,000 a year. Someone comes in, puts a lot of money into that property and creates jobs, and they increase the value of that property to $100,000. Well, maybe under the pilot agreement, we've agreed over the next 5 or 10 years to only tax that property at $50,000, working toward the $100,000 over that period of time. And so the way the tax cap formula looks at it, it says, hey, if you're getting revenues from these pilot agreements, you can't include that in your tax levy. So that's why there's a plus and minus. You see the pilot revenues for this year, the top half, and you see the pilot revenues for next year being subtracted out in the second half. We also look at tax levy for capital. And what that simply is the local share of capital projects. So anytime that the taxpayers over time have voted on a capital project, and they've agreed, hey, we'll allow our levy to go up to support this roof project or this, redo of the Michael J. Bragman Stadium or the Bear Road Elementary School, or whatever the project is, that amount of money is allowed to be levied because the voters previously approved that. But rest assured, as soon as that project is paid for, that amount drops off as well. And so we can only include in our tax levy projects that haven't been fully paid for. At the end of the day, our levy for next year is $95.3 million. That's what we're asking the taxpayers to support. It's a levy increase of $2.8 million, or 3.05%. Again, that's within the tax cap formula. It's an increase of about $71 on a $100,000 home before STAR. And the North Syracuse Central School District is made up of 3 towns, Cicero, Clay, and Salina. And 2 of the towns, Cicero and Salina, are full value towns. And what that means is that theoretically, when you look at the assessed value of your home, if you live in Cicero and Salina, that assessed value should represent the full value, the fair market value of your property. The town of Clay uses a partial assessment. And I will say it looks odd, but almost half the districts in New York State still are under some, or jurisdictions, I should say, are still under some form of partial assessment. But in order to keep that fair and equal, there's a thing called an equalization rate. So when we look at the town of Clay, we equalize their value so that when we apply the taxes, each house worth $100,000 value in Cicero, Clay, and Salina will pay the same amount in school taxes. The rate may be different, but the school tax bill will be the same. And so it's estimated for a $100,000 home that they'd pay $2,414, or about $71 increase over last year before STAR. Of course, our expenditures of $180.2 million equal our revenues. On the expenditure side, we say this all the time, that the most important thing we do as a school district is put an adult in front of a child to support their learning, to support their social emotional well-being. And that's why when you look at this pie chart, it's mostly salaries and benefits. The other big piece here is BOCES. I mentioned earlier that we buy a lot of special ed services and information technology services and curriculum, again, all focused on supporting our instructional process here. Debt service, that's our mortgage. That's the debt that the district has to pay. That's our mortgage payment for the 21-22 school year. And then there's a special project up there. And every year we do a special project. They're usually around safety or security. This year's project that we're proposing is a project around safety. We've got some deteriorating columns in the basement of our high school. Nothing that is dangerous at this time, but our architects have recommended that we repair those. And so that's what that project's about. You can see the expenditure increase equals the revenue increase, about $7.6 million, or 4.46%. Don't worry, our employees did not get a 6.43% raise. You'll see as Superintendent Bowles takes us through some of the initiatives that we're adding a lot of people to support our students and staff as we come through our education post-COVID. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dan.
Thank you, Don. So the 4 areas that we're focusing on are support for student learning. We've had less in-person contact, so there are some steps that we're doing to secure and support some of the students based on some of the pieces that they've missed out on. Also, the social emotional needs get repeated every day on the news. We're in a pandemic. The trauma that's happened for all of our students and families is significant, and we want to make sure we put resources to address those needs for students and families. Ongoing management of COVID-19, a lot of health and safety protocols. They'll probably still stay in place for some time, so we want to continue to make sure that everyone is being kept safe. And then some instructional practices with our one-to-one technology and licensing of Google Meets, Google Classroom, and ClassLink. So some of the supports, North Syracuse for the past year and a half has not had a person that's focused on as a director of math. That was a shared responsibility, so we are having a director of math put back into place. We're adding AIS support, so academic intervention services, to each elementary school and middle school. For teachers on special assignment to support the new K-4 ELA program that will be helping with professional development and the instruction in the classroom. Tier 2 and Tier 3 with phonics, we've realized that there's been an area that we need to focus on to bring up our ELA scores. We are also providing an elementary summer school program so that we are targeting needy students to address some of the deficits that they had over this past year. We will be continuing with BOCES summer school for our junior high and high school students. Also supports expanded summer credit recovery. This is another area where students can earn high school credit to stay on cohort towards graduation. Additional 12 elementary teaching assistants. One of the things that we've realized is that several of the districts do have teaching assistants at first grade level. We are targeting 2 teaching assistants per elementary school. So out of 6 elementary schools, that will be 2 teaching assistants for first grade. 3 special education teachers to support the CTD students, get special needs in the classroom. An additional ENL teacher, English as a new language, for the needs between the junior high and the high school. And we will be increasing 1 section of specials for Roxborough Road Middle School, which ends up due to a 0.6 increase in enrollment. Social emotional needs. We have the largest high school in Onondaga County, except for Syracuse City, which has 4. So meeting the needs of all the students, especially with all the trauma and social emotional, we're adding 2 social workers to the high school. We're also adding a counselor to the junior high school, and with that counselor to support is a counselor or guidance secretary. I'm not sure if people heard, but Ryan McMahon is partnering with many school districts and providing agencies to support families. Contact is one of them. Access, Liberty Resources. So we're partnering with them. So the student assistance counselor at CNS. Roxborough Road Middle School, a family engagement specialist. Roxborough Road Middle School is a needed targeted school improvement. And so this person will help engage the families and students with supports. Looking at including restorative practices. And so we'll have a specialist at both the middle school and elementary school at Roxborough to work on restorative practices. And with Mrs. Goldberg, second step implementation, she is our director of social emotional learning. Expansion of BIMAS, which helps basically diagnose students that are having some critical needs. Ruler training and additional conferences and speakers will be funded. Under the ongoing management, we have addition of a district nurse supervisor. One of the things with COVID, there's been a lot of medical issues that have had to be maintained. We've realized that there are several districts that do have this position, and it would be an asset to the district to have that person oversee all the nurses. We are looking at doing ongoing testing of asymptomatic students, offering our schools as vaccination sites. We pulled off a vaccination site at the high school last week. We're looking to continue that partnership with the county as they offer more vaccines to different age groups. And continued focus on the cleaning and ventilation strategies and improving the health of our environments. Other things that have impacted our budget, reduction of 7 elementary teachers based on class size will be offset by retirements. This term where you see EQWP, they pronounce it egg whip. By working on that funding source, we're saving several positions by working with implementing a new prescription drug plan for our retirees. We have a reduction of 7 teaching assistants based on the completion of CSC meetings and finalization of IEPs. Increase of equipment budget to support improved learning environments. Some additional areas that we saw some shortfalls. There was a need for a cross-country modified coach, some funds for paving, custodial trainer and summer crew leaders, and maintenance crew leader.
Thanks. Thank you, Dan. So a lot of numbers on this slide. Don't get intimidated. I'm going to talk a little bit about fund balance. So what is fund balance? Fund balance is the district's savings account. And the New York State Comptroller recommends that schools have 4% of their budget in fund balance. We're projecting about a 3.94% fund balance at the end of this year. I'm going to be on a lot of accounting to do between now and the end of the year, but that's what our projections indicate. And I think with the uncertainty of our funding that we've experienced over the years, with a lot of variables in our budget, things like healthcare and fuel costs, we're seeing fuel costs go up and energy costs and just a lot of different things. We need to have enough savings that we can assure the taxpayers that we're going to be able to maintain a balanced budget and have some money to fall back on. So rest assured, this amount is consistent with what other school districts are attempting to do. It is something we've not been able to do many years, but in recent history, we've really worked hard at shoring up our balance sheet and being prepared for uncertainties. And that's fund balance. That's the things, that's our savings account. We also have specific liabilities, things that we know we're responsible for. And we work with experts to determine who in our district, what businesses are contesting their assessments. And if they contest their assessments and they win, we may have to refund back to them school taxes. That's the tax certiorari liability up there. So we literally, to support that number, we have a detailed list of all the properties where people have filed a formal claim to contest their assessments. Workman's compensation, we're a large multi-location employer with 1,400 employees, a couple hundred substitutes working at the district. And so we have workman's comp claims, and we have to have those reserved properly so that when we do take care of the folks that got hurt while they were serving the community, we don't put our programs at jeopardy. And so we need to have that liability covered. Debt service, that's where we've been very lucky to complete projects under budget, and therefore have been able to save up some money into our debt service fund that'll pay down future debt or go toward future projects with voter approval. The debt service fund also just recognizes the lower interest rate environment we're in. Often when our projects are done, our financial experts say, hey, this project's you're gonna have to pay this much money on your mortgage or on your debt. But we've been very fortunate to maintain a high credit rating and to have financed those projects at lower rates than we expected. And that's also contributed to the debt service fund there. We have a little bit of money left in our capital fund. And if people remember, we replaced the turf on our athletic field as part of a renovation there recently. And we wanted to make sure we had enough money put aside so that next time we have to consider replacing turf, we've got a jump start on that. And that's what that particular capital reserve is all about. ERS, that's our employee retirement system. TRS, our teachers retirement system. We're very lucky in New York State, unlike several states around the country, to have very well managed pension funds. And what that means to the taxpayer is that these are fully funded pension plans. They're actuarially evaluated every year. They look at the assets in the fund, they look at the liabilities of the fund, and they determine that the assets are adequate. And unfortunately, though, we've all seen some volatility in our stock market, the underlying investments of these funds. And so what our district has done is we've set up some reserves so that in years where the funding requirement for our pension funds increases, we can soften the blow and level out that cost by using money from our ERS and TRS reserves. We also have a reserve for employee benefit liabilities that the district would have. And so I wanted to go through those in detail to let you know that we've got money put aside for the known liabilities. We've worked with our accountants and our financial experts to quantify those amounts. And that should hopefully make people in the community feel that we're being good stewards of their financial resources. Vehicle bonding. At the end of the day, our safety in the way we transport our students is the most important thing. And we are very lucky to have a very well-run transportation department. We've got one of the largest fleets. Frankly, we got one of the largest fleets in the state because we're a large school. We're one of the bigger schools in the school districts in the state. And our buses we triple trip our kids. And what that means, in order to minimize the number of drivers we have to have on the payroll and the number of buses we have to have on the road, we pick up our high school and junior high first, and then we use those same buses to go out and get the middle school kids. Then we use the same buses to go get our elementary kids. Some districts single trip their kids, some double trip their kids, very few triple trip. So it's a pretty efficient run operation. But the bottom line is we can't have buses that are over 10 years old. They become mechanically unreliable, and they become very costly. And so this district has had a longstanding practice of systematically replacing its buses. And so with this proposition, we're once again asking the community to support the purchase of a dozen buses, 10 traditional buses for a typical student transportation, 2 that would service our special needs population. They have wheelchair positions and ramps and hydraulic lifts and air conditioning to meet the needs of those students. And then we're going to buy 1 loader for our M&O department for M&O projects. Total of the 13 vehicles is $1.7 million. We're very lucky to have an 80.4% transportation aid rate. And so the cost of these vehicles is about $1.73 per year per house, assessed at $100,000, again, before STAR. We are very blessed in our community to have the Salina Library as part of our community. It's right there on our campus or adjacent to our campus at Roxborough Road. One of the obligations that a school district has is to allow the library's proposition, although we have nothing to do with the management of the library or any financial responsibility for the library, we're obligated to allow their proposition to appear on our ballot. And I can just say this is a very modest increase that the library is requesting, and it shows a 1.9% increase overall and a 2-cent increase on the taxpayers in the town of Salina. Timeline: we're coming to the end of our budget process. Tonight was the budget hearing. We appreciate everybody being here. In 2 weeks, we'll have the budget vote. While we can't tell you how to vote, we would appreciate getting the word out for those of you that are listening, and encourage you to tell your friends and neighbors to come out and vote, exercise their democratic right to either vote for or against the school budget.
Are there any questions?
Okay. Well, seeing none, I have to put my glasses on now because I'm seeing none. At this time, I'd like to introduce the candidates for the school board that we have here. And you have to excuse me because you're all wearing masks, so I don't know who anybody is, but I'm going to go in order, except for myself, on who we have in the district dispatch. So we have Michelle Henry. She's out here somewhere. Hello, Michelle, who's a candidate for the school board. We have Beth Kramer. Hi, Beth. We have Xavier Moody Wusick. Hello, Xavier. We have Nicole Planty. Hello, and we have Mark Thorne over here. And the 6th one is me. I'm Paul Farfalia, currently serving as president of the school board. So with that, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.